True Crime Rocket Science. This is day 7 of the Patrick FRAZEE murder trial. It's a day in which 14 witnesses were heard overall, 8 in the morning and 6 in the afternoon. You may recall that day 6 was dedicated to a lot of evidence related to the cadaver dogs and the disposal, based on the prosecution's case and based on the investigators' evidence, the disposal of Kelsey's remains, allegedly. Trial day 7 has been a shocking day. It's been once again a day filled with a lot of different people testifying, but a lot of shocking moments. It's incredible how FRAZEE's own words sort of have condemned him, not just with one witness but with many. Just, the saying "loose lips sink ships" comes to mind. There's testimony from other potential girlfriends, and then also from his clients and things that they've said. Before we get to that, please subscribe to this channel, like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. Now, as I mentioned, there were 8 witnesses called to the stand in the morning. There were also investigators that described the searches that they did after Lee made her confession. So her confession led to additional searches, and we will go through that. One of the first to testify was Slagle, Robert Slagle, FRAZEE's best friend. He took the stand. He testified that he picked up a package from Kelsey's townhouse at FRAZEE's request and went on an alibi trip with FRAZEE to retrace his steps on November 22nd. Not quite sure what that's all about. Probably in an article we'll get more detail around that, but what nevertheless becomes quite obvious is that FRAZEE sort of seemed to be quite open with what was going on, and there were a lot of people who you could either say were in cahoots with him, or who were pretty close to the events that were going on. I mean, the fact that FRAZEE has sort of had Slagle go to Kelsey's townhouse at his request and pick up a package, one wonders what that's all about. What package was he supposed to pick up? And one also wonders whether FRAZEE was trying to set Slagle up. Maybe if Slagle went there, he'd also be picked up in the surveillance cameras, and that would then implicate his friend, or certainly muddy the job of implicating him, right? Then there was also a CBI crime scene analyst. From what I can see, the person wasn't really identified by the media, but apparently it's a she. She gathered evidence from Kelsey's townhouse and showed photos of tiny spots of blood, such as on the chairs, which were acting as a TV stand, the fireplace, and the couch. So it just shows you there wasn't only blood in the bathroom. There were tiny specks of blood also on chairs and the fireplace and the couch. And it's incredible that Kelsey's family lived in the townhome for a couple of days, and it took them quite a while to actually notice. They didn't notice those blood stains, but they did notice the spots in the bathroom. Just a quick reference to the CSI or CSA. CSI is often referred to as the crime scene investigator, but it could also be an analyst. In the Chris Watts case, the CSA was Dave Yoakum, and so obviously the woman, as far as I know, hasn't been identified here. Would be interesting to know who the CSA or CSI was. In any event, there's some interesting comments from Carol McKinley calling the testimony of this particular CSA tedious. Yeah, a lot of the forensic stuff can be very detailed and very technical, and that can be an aspect of the trial, but I don't think it went on for very long. And McKinley also touches on this very, very good friend, Robert Slagle, who, as she put it, described how they drove to Woodland Park to establish an alibi for him for Thanksgiving 2018. It's not clear at what time that happened, but we move on to Laurie Luce of Park County. She recounted statements FRAZEE made during his monthly visits to attend to her horse's hooves, because one of the things he did was he worked as a farrier, and one thing that he told his client, Laurie, was that Kelsey was unstable and didn't want to be a mother. So we can see he was clearly setting the scene amongst the community for what was about to transpire. And then Laurie Luce also testified that she didn't tell the CBI about these incriminating comments FRAZEE had told her during her first interview, because she said she felt uncomfortable violating his confidence. She said she hoped that she wouldn't be involved. I think this qualifies as one of the big what the ifs of this case. It seems like there are a lot of people just like her in this case who simply didn't want to be involved. It didn't seem to matter to them that a woman was missing. It didn't seem to matter as a woman that another woman was missing. It's just incredible that she's actually being questioned by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and during her first interview she obviously withheld information. They're trying to find a missing woman, and she then wasn't completely transparent with them, and according to her felt uncomfortable violating FRAZEE's confidence, and because of that she felt justified in not either telling them the truth or not being completely honest or not being completely forthcoming. And there seems to be a sort of a kind of a narcissism involved where these witnesses, just because they don't want to be involved, that they just don't assist in these investigations. It's quite strange. And Luce isn't the only one that seems to be in this boat of non-disclosure. Now, Elise Schmelzer refers to a same woman said something that when she met FRAZEE after Kelsey disappeared, that she and FRAZEE were speculating about what happened, and when she suggested that Kelsey might come back, FRAZEE said, "Oh, she's never coming back." Again, there's an example of loose lips sink ships. He makes that comment, and Jared comes up at trial, and one wonders how the jury reacted when they heard this. This again is another what the F moment on this particular court day. It just beggars belief that he would say something like that. If Chris Watts was a bad liar, he lacked social game. If FRAZEE had social game, he also seemed to lack attacked, and he also seemed to be very arrogant in his confidence that he could, it seems that way, that he could potentially get away with a crime. I just want to quickly go back to the CSA. She also showed photos of torn up floorboards, which showed a lot more potential blood that could have seeped between the boards based on Kenney's information. I touched on that in a previous previous episode, dealing with the cadaver dogs and dealing with how in the apartment 5A of the McCanns, tiles were chopped up, and the whole idea is, if a crime scene is cleaned up, that's the one area that's very difficult to clean. Remember, blood is just a liquid, and it's going to go into all cracks and crevices and sort of micro fissures in walls or floors or between planks. So that does appear to be what's happened. What is amazing in this particular trial and really stands out is this idea of you have the perpetrator saying something, the police accepting it, and it just seems as if the Teller County cops were either unsophisticated or understaffed, or just maybe they knew Frazee by reputation, or maybe they knew him by personality, and they accepted what he said, accepted that he was a well-liked member of the community, and so they just let it go. When they spoke to other people, maybe they said, no, we think Kelsey wasn't very happy, she probably just left, and that seemed to maybe provide reinforcement to them. But be that as it may, what's incredible about this case is you literally have, when the cops do investigate, they sort of investigate and they find nothing, or what they find is of negligible significance. And then they find a little bit more, for example, that blood drop, which they don't even find, it's found by Kelsey's brother, and then from there they look harder, and then they eventually track down Kenney, and they eventually twist her arm and get her to cooperate. And once that happens, she then takes them back to the crime scene again, and then she's able to sort of point out, look here, look there, and when they do, suddenly the evidence that's been there all along is revealed. And it just shows you an argument can be made that when there's a crime, there needs to be a lot of effort searching for clues, and it's almost as if the police and investigators sort of do a gloss over, and if they don't find something, then that's enough. I'm not saying the clues in this case were easy to find. I'm just saying it's just surprising how they were there all along, and they had to kind of be pointed out, and when they were pointed out, they were still there. So this brings us back to the sort of burn pit and the the destruction of evidence using fire. And Elise Schmelzer refers to it as interesting testimony in the afternoon. They had an arson fire expert. I think he was a retired CBI guy, not named, so we're not quite sure who he is, but he said there was a burned plastic mark and oily soil mark on the Frazee Ranch, and he, in his opinion, he said it was consistent with a body burned in a plastic tote, just as a key witness had said. I'm guessing the key witness is Kenney. And then he added that this oily spot could also be from motor oil used as an accelerant. Lance Benzel from the Gazette provides more unsettling, disquieting detail in this regard. He refers to the ex-CBI fire investigator suggesting a grisly cause of the oil stain in the dirt, oil from melted human fat. And then he acknowledges that he can't prove that it's that, but it could be that in his opinion. Ashley Franco tweeted something in a similar vein, referring to a bit from the investigator on the stand. She went to the Nash Ranch to look at a stain on top of a hay bale. And I'm not quite sure what Franco means by today in front of court she measured that stain. I'm not sure if that's projected in the court or what, but according to Franco, the bale is depicted somehow, and this is where FRAZEE allegedly put Kelsey's body in a black tote box. This is on top of the bale of hay. So Franco goes on to say, after an investigator measured the stain, prosecutors gave her a tape measure and a black tote box which they retrieved from FRAZEE's property. So another black tote box which they retrieved from his property. She then measured the tote, which had almost identical measurements to the stain on the top of the hay bale. So it seems as if this was like a demonstration in court for the benefit of the jury. And we'll come back to those measurements in a moment. There are also a couple of tweets by Lance Benzel referring to the oil stain being right next to a mass of melted plastic that authorities believed held Kelsey's remains. So it would sort of stand to reason that if you had this melted plastic, this sort of coagulated puddle of melted plastic, that this other kind of residue would be right beside it. Okay, and then returning to those dimensions, Sam Kramer refers to a better photo of the discolored hay bale at Nash Ranch. The details on the photo appear dark black or brown, and he says, and this is quite significant, he says the dimensions align with those of the identical black tote entered as evidence. Now bear in mind what we already have is the cadaver dog signaling there. We've got Kenney pointing out that particular spot because she was there as a witness, according to her. And then we've also got the measurements conforming to the measurements of the tote box. In other words, the measurement of the sort of blood stain under the tote corresponds to the basic size of the tote box. And so it was essentially like putting a if you imagine soaking a toaster in some kind of liquid and then putting the toast on a pillow, the liquid would then drain from the toaster onto the pillow pretty much in the shape of the toaster. In any event, Sam Kramer then gives some specific detail. He refers to the District Attorney Dan May handing the CBI analyst a tape measure, I guess in court, and she then measures the bottom of the identical tote recovered from FRAZEE's farm. It's 35 inches long by 20 inches wide, and the discolored area was 38 inches by 30 inches wide. And one can imagine the discolored area being either slightly bigger if there was more blood or fluid, or slightly smaller if there was less. The fact that it's slightly bigger or slightly smaller, I don't think would necessarily mean that it's it not being an exact match isn't something that I think is worthy of disputing, but the fact is it's a pretty close match. 35 inches long, and then the discolored area 38 inches long. So that is certainly very interesting, and it is pretty grisly. It's pretty upsetting. I mean, clearly, what appeared to happen to Kelsey's body, she shed a lot of blood, and there was a lot of post-mortem blood loss, bleeding out as well. And then Sam Kramer touches on some other people from law enforcement, including a Twin Falls police detective, and he testified about burnt electronic pieces and a broken glass screen protector in burn pits at Kenney's home. Now, this is at Kenney's home, right? Now, what I just want to sort of reinforce here is the amount of reinforcing evidence that there is to, one might say, well, you know, the fact that a dog alerted, that's not sufficient evidence. But you can see that the prosecution are putting together a mosaic that's very hard to dispute. And one of the objections, or one of the counters from the defense, was that okay, well, so you found all this evidence of burning. Well, did you find any of the metal clips on the plastic tote? I mean, if you found all these other things, did you find the metal clips? And they didn't. And so that does potentially raise reasonable doubt. But again, one must compare that reasonable doubt to the mosaic that the prosecution are presenting. And this whole idea of burning evidence brings us to the one intertextuality I want to touch on in this video, and that's the Steven Avery case. An article in Business Insider refers to the contents of Teresa Halbach's purse found in a barrel close to Avery's property. So it's literally a situation where another woman was burnt, Teresa Halbach, and also in a burn pit. And then at the same time, evidence, it was almost like the impression you get is whoever killed Teresa sort of thought, well, I might as well just use the fire to get rid of other evidence as well. Big mistake, because flesh may be somewhat flammable, and bones may be somewhat flammable, but as soon as you put in things like a cell phone or something, you might destroy the evidence. In other words, you won't be able to recover what's on the handset or recover DNA, but you're going to see that a phone was burnt in this particular location. And how hard is it going to be to match the phone to the victim? And so just sticking with the Steven Avery case a little bit longer, you see that image again of the huge burn pit, and according to investigators, her bones were in the fire pit were intertwined with steel belts left over from car tires that Avery threw into the fire to burn. And you can actually imagine how someone in a scrapyard would be familiar with, he'd obviously burned things before, he had access to the tires, and this whole idea of putting the body inside these tires, and in both cases we know there were huge fires. There was a huge fire in the FRAZEE case, huge fire in the Avery case. The idea is to incinerate this body to nothing, to absolutely make them turn to kind of smoke, to completely have them completely disappear. And what they find then is you might be able to get rid of 99.9%, but there might still be an oil stain left behind. There might be a tooth fragment which is identified as human. There might also be a cell phone that's charred. Now, what I think a lot of people that are sort of fans of Making a Murderer, and also people who maybe are fairly new to true crime, what I don't think they always recognize is, if you find human remains anywhere, that means a human being died there, right? And in your experience, like if you think of your home, I don't know if you've got a garden, but if somebody had to find human remains in your garden, it literally means a dead person was hidden or disposed of or buried or gotten rid of or whatever in your garden, right? In other words, someone was probably murdered and their body hidden away. And so this idea that, if you dig up a pit and you're going to find human remains, well, it's no big deal. It could be this person or that person. It could be. It's actually not like that. If you have somebody disappearing and they've been making calls to a particular person and then you find their remains in that person's backyard, it's very, very incriminating. It's very, very incriminating. And so, although we can't identify the tooth or even the DNA, the mosaic is starting to sketch a scene that Kelsey was incinerated, but also that her phone was then incinerated somewhere else. And we know that Kenney took Kelsey's phone to Idaho. And so the fact that Kenney would also use fire to dispose of the evidence is very interesting, that it's a similar means of disposing the remnants, the artifacts of Kelsey. And then it's mirroring, it's an intertextual aspect to the Steven Avery thing, where he did the same thing. There's also the burning of the body in the backyard, and then also the burning of the cell phone. It's literally the thing of, well, I want to get rid of all this evidence, I might as well throw this evidence in the fire and think that's a good idea. Is metal going to burn? And so you can literally see how the remnants of of Teresa Halbach's handset were reconstituted, recovered from the burn barrel, and this again was very inculpatory evidence. Okay, and then that's really the end of trial day 7. The judge called an early recess. 14 witnesses testified, all of them in kind of rapid fire, and when that happened, when that was when the 14 were through, the judge said that the trial was significantly ahead of schedule. So it's possible that the trial may be done and dusted in terms of leading the evidence by either Wednesday or Thursday. In other words, might even be done before the end of this week. Before wrapping up trial day 7, I just want to touch on a couple of the other witnesses. As I say, there were 14 witnesses. Some of them were Kenney's co-workers, and what is interesting is that they testified that she wasn't acting like herself after the trip to Colorado. Bear in mind, she went from Idaho down to Colorado just after Thanksgiving and then back again, and her co-workers noticed that she didn't look very happy, and that at least is a credit to her, the fact that she was shaken by what had happened. She was upset, she was worried. That at least shows that some kind of humanity in a case that just seems very cruel and horrific. And this brings us to the tweet of the day for day 7. It goes to Sam Kramer for his tweet about the CBI analyst taking out the tape measure and providing the actual measurements for the identical tote. It's not just that that tweet is also the one following, just how the discolored hay bale at the Nash Ranch, the dimensions aligned with the identical black tote. Sam Kramer also added to this, also with a great tweet referring to the cross-examination from Adam Steigerwald, who pointed out something that I mentioned before about the metal hinges or clasps to the tote that were never found. But the prosecutor said that, well, the area could have been cleaned in the month prior, and you can imagine if they were covering dirt over the burn patch, they may have also removed things like metal clasps, which I think may have been clearly visible. But it's not a bad point from Kramer. Sorry, from Steigerwald, the defense lawyer. I just want to repeat this, what the tweet about the one witness just saying that, when she was questioned by the CBI, she felt uncomfortable. She thought she was violating FRAZEE's confidence. This is in a potential murder investigation, and she doesn't want to be involved. It's exactly that kind of thing that is why some people think they can get away with murder. And then the other one where FRAZEE told a woman that she's never coming back. These almost qualify as tweets of the day. And then I just want to run through a couple of others. There were a handful of horse owners who hired FRAZEE to be their farrier. One of them remembered him saying that he only wanted Kelsey to pay for the medical expenses. He only wanted her to be involved in that way. And one thing that he said to her, again, loose lips sink ships, he said, I just want her gone. And so you're having all of these witnesses adding step by step, slowly, systematically, to this mosaic, which all of which is reinforcing kind of itself. Right, we haven't heard from the defense yet. We haven't heard what their case is, but the prosecution is certainly putting on a very strong case with a lot of witnesses, and a lot of them were quite close to FRAZEE in some way or other, either clients or family members or his mistress, or, as we're about to see, girlfriends. So this brings us to a tweet from Lance Benzel from the Gazette. It refers to Savannah Griesby, a Colorado Springs nurse. According to her, she exchanged flirtatious texts with FRAZEE the day before the alleged murder. I mean, that is incredible, and it starts to resemble the Chris Watts case in so many ways, doesn't it? This idea that maybe he was also really trying to extricate himself, not just out of his obligations to Kelsey, but also wanting to get involved with somebody else. But now bear in mind, Kelsey's moved there and they share a child together, and he feels stuck, kind of thing. And so there are these echoes of the Watts case where he wants to liberate himself, right? And so what he previously complained to Griesby that life was getting in his way, and again, that is feels like a verbatim statement. It's just so ironic that the symbolism of that life was getting in his way, and so he had to do away with life. And even in his statement where he said life is about to slow down, I mean, think about the chilling message, the chilling symbolism in those words for Kelsey. Life is about to slow down. And so it's interesting that Griesby actually sent FRAZEE a text wishing him happy Thanksgiving on the holiday, and he hadn't gotten back to her. And so, obviously, what he did, when he did respond, and he said, life was getting in his way. That was the day after the incident, and it's clear that he was very busy on that Thanksgiving holiday to get back to the person that he probably wanted to get back to. But just bear in mind that, if FRAZEE was romantically involved or flirting with, or there were just possibilities of who knows what going on, then him recruiting Kenney into his scenario is double playing the woman in his life. It's sort of almost suggesting that if you help me, we will XYZ. If you do this, then maybe I will do that, or whatever. Meanwhile, wasn't involved with a different person, and his intention was really wasn't his intention to use Kenney to get what he wanted so that he could be with someone else. And this brings us to another text by Lance Benzel referring to texts shown by prosecutors where Griesby seemed to be a situation where FRAZEE was angling to get Griesby to have dinner with him or just hang out shortly after Thanksgiving. We don't have any idea of what it's difficult to say what FRAZEE may have been thinking, or who this person was that he was interacting with. But if you do a Google image search of Savannah Griesby, she doesn't come up, but there are other Griesbys who do come up, who seem to be young women, and attractive young women as well, and that they seem to be some of them seem to be in the Colorado area. I'm not going to put their images up because I'm not sure whether they are relatives, but they certainly do look like attractive women, and they could certainly be relatives. I'm just saying the picture does change when you see some of these women, and you can see what kind of incentive, what kind of temptation, what kind of desire may have been involved with FRAZEE. And like I said in a previous episode, that huge fire is a psychological symbol for something else, for desire, for anger, for a lot of emotion. So we have two other witnesses besides Savannah Griesby who basically said the same sort of thing. Catherine Donahue of Cannon City said that she didn't know that Kelsey was pregnant until she went to the hospital, and she also says that FRAZEE never had anything good to say about Kelsey. So it seems there was this repeated theme of her being an unfit mother. And then finally, Lance Benzel refers to another woman. I think two of these three women were named. The third isn't named, but in any event, it says that this third client who used FRAZEE as a farrier said that they had a 4 to 6 week sexual relationship in 2016, and it ended when he stopped replying to her texts. And so we have a premise here for FRAZEE being something of a playboy. It almost seems as if he has kind of encounters with his clients, or those encounters lead to them becoming clients. It's hard to say which, but a lot of incriminating information here that's going to be difficult to wriggle out of. In any event, thank you for listening. That's the end of Court Day 7. Stay tuned tomorrow for Trial Day 8. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe to the channel, like, ring the bell, and leave a comment. And I will see you guys tomorrow week.